Okay, so it's just gone 10 o'clock, so we are going to kick off just as a few more people are starting to arrive. So thank you for joining us for this morning's webcast where we're talking about managing post-Christmas party issues. I've got a festive jumper on today. It's our Christmas party today, so hopefully we won't be having any of these issues at the Heroes Christmas party today. It's unlikely because we are doing a escape room and then a very sober lunch, setting a good example for, I suppose, best practice in Christmas parties. I hope you're all ready for the run up to Christmas as well. I had the horror this morning of realizing that Christmas is only just over a week away and have yet to finish my Christmas shopping. So hopefully you're all a bit further along than me. And before I started prattling on, I should probably have checked that everybody can hear me and see me all right. If someone can just drop a thumbs up into the chat just to make sure that the sound's all right, and then we will get started with the session. Perfect. So we're going to be talking about Christmas party issues and how we can manage them. Yes, Joe, 3 sleeps to the online Christmas party. Thanks for reminding me. I still don't have anything to wear. And we're going to be going through the reality of post-party issues, legal risks and business dangers, how we handle inappropriate behaviour and how we can create some effective policies. And then we've got time for a bit of a Q&A at the end. And as always, if anybody has got any issues that they want to talk about offline, I'm always happy to have a chat with anyone who's been on these sessions as well. So the reality of festive celebrations, Christmas parties are supposed to be one of the most fun parts of the year. It's a great way to boost morale, celebrate team achievements. However, the combination of people getting overexcited, alcohol, knowing that they've got a bit of a Christmas break coming ahead and starting to relax does mean that sometimes boundaries can get a bit blurred and social pressures can lead to situations that require HR intervention. So the key is knowing how we can set ourselves up for success, how we can respond swiftly, fairly and professionally, and also try and maintain a bit of workplace culture and still try and have a bit of fun at work without being called, I'm trying to think of the things that I've been called in the last week, particularly when I've been talking about safe Christmas parties. So the person who saps all the fun out of workplace Christmas is something that I've had from one of my friends. So what we will gain from this session is practical strategies for addressing inappropriate behaviour, understanding the legal and business risks, creating policies that balance fun with professionalism, and some real world insights from ourselves as employment law experts. So first poll of the session, how confident are you that your organisation can handle a Christmas party incident fairly and legally? Firstly, very confident, 2, somewhat confident, 3, not very confident, would be reacting rather than being prepared, or honestly, I have got no idea. So we've got 50% saying very confident, 50% somewhat confident. I mean, I don't know how much any of you follow our LinkedIn. It may actually surprise you that the industry does make quite a bit of a thing about how risky Christmas parties are, when the reality is last year, out of 100,000 employment tribunals, only 40 of them actually related to things that went wrong at Christmas parties. So there is definitely a bit of a HR marketing thing around this sort of thing, which is, unless you are listening to our sessions and buying our content and our services, you're going to get sued. The chances of being sued are actually very, very low. What we want to avoid is really people thinking about our work Christmas party and thinking, oh, that was a bad one. Remember when this happened? Or potentially losing somebody because of something that happens, or perhaps affecting workplace relationships. So it's not all about selling fear. What we want to do is have the confidence to go into the festive period thinking, how can we make sure that the Christmas party isn't something that ruins what's been a very good year for us? If you want to hear in more detail about one of the scenarios that we have dealt with, so a real scenario, in our podcast, we covered an instance where someone got naked at the Christmas party, climbed on the dinner table, and told his CEO to go and F his job. So if you want to hear about how we handled that one, we do cover it in detail in the HRER podcast. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, it's a great one to get started with, where we take apart various scenarios that have come to us through our consultancy service, and we talk about how we solved them and the right and the wrong ways of doing things. So common examples of bad behaviour, things that we can come across this time of year: excessive alcohol consumption. I've actually had a query in this morning about someone who's turned up for work drunk and they've blamed it on mouthwash. He's 3 times the limit. It wasn't the mouthwash. Excessive alcohol consumption can lead to obviously embarrassing incidents, impaired judgment, unsafe travel home, or even people coming into work the next day under the influence. If this guy has come in 3 times over the limit after a party last night, that's pretty impressive consumption levels, to be honest, if he's still that drunk this morning. Inappropriate conduct, so this can come also from alcohol consumption, so unwanted physical contact, verbal advances or harassment towards colleagues. And of course, the excuse, oh, I just had too much to drink, is never going to be an excuse if someone has done something that constitutes sexual harassment. Offensive remarks, so derogatory jokes, discriminatory comments or remarks that target specific colleagues, clients or protected characteristics, again, potentially going to land us in hot water around discrimination or sexual harassment. Brushing them off as banter or just because it was the Christmas party, believe it or not, is not going to mean that a judge isn't going to send us down on a discrimination complaint. Reckless or damaging acts, so disruptive behaviour like property damage, unsafe stunts or general recklessness. Social media misuse, so unauthorised sharing of embarrassing photos or videos of colleagues on social media platforms. So people, when they've had a few too many to drink, get a bit overexcited and sometimes will share things. And then the next morning certainly regret it, particularly if they don't have somebody's permission to share something that's potentially embarrassing. And then conflicts and altercations, so engaging in heated arguments or physical disputes with fellow employees. One of my favourites when I worked in a law firm was that you knew exactly who was going to come and approach you and tell you that they deserved a pay rise and that their appraisal was totally wrong and they don't like their manager once they have the confidence of a bit of alcohol in them. And invariably, it can often lead to then conflicts afterwards. So are there any issues that you have ever actually dealt with after a work social event, or is this all theoretical to you? Have you ever dealt with inappropriate comments or behaviour, social media posts causing embarrassment, alcohol-related issues, so lateness, sickness, any conduct issues, conflict between colleagues, or is it thankfully none of the above yet? So drop a comment into the poll. And this could be something that you've witnessed or actually something that's happened to you. I've worked in the corporate world and have to say I think I've witnessed every single one of them and had at least 2 of them happen to me. If you're a woman who's worked in the city, I'm sure we all know exactly which ones we've all been subjected to at one time or another. So let's hope this year it's a clean sweep and we don't have any of this. So inappropriate comments or behaviour, we've got 2 in there. So anybody else wanting to drop anything into the poll? Just inappropriate comments. It wouldn't surprise me if it is that one. So now we're going to move on to the key legal claims that can arise from those sorts of incidents. So sexual harassment, unwanted sexual advances, comments or physical contact. As we hopefully all know by now, it doesn't have to be just physical contact for something to be classed as sexual harassment. And even if somebody thinks that somebody is interested or perhaps thinks that someone was asking for it, if someone has read the room wrong, it is likely to be sexual harassment. We have done whole sessions on this. We've got our big e-learning campaign on this. Sexual harassment is a massive risk when it comes to work social events, particularly where you've got perhaps larger teams that don't necessarily all know each other very well. Where you've got smaller teams, it can be a bit easier to manage those relationships. People know and trust each other a little bit more and they know where the boundaries are. But where you're mixing alcohol in with larger teams in parties where perhaps things get a little bit out of control, there is a very real risk of sexual harassment. And as I've already said, saying it's banter, I didn't really mean it, I thought she wanted it, or I'd been drinking too much, none of those are going to be acceptable excuses. Discrimination, so where somebody engages in banter, jokes or pranks based on protected characteristics, so anything around age, race, gender, disability, religion, hopefully this is all preaching to the choir and you all know what I'm talking about here. Unfair dismissal, so where somebody either thinks you've overreacted because you've disciplined them because of something that went on at a party, or even constructive dismissal where something has happened to somebody, they've complained and we've not taken it seriously and brushed it off because it's just a Christmas party and people are just trying to have fun. Personal injury, so these always make for rather entertaining stories in the new year. Obviously, it's very sad when people hurt themselves at work, but when someone has got drunk, done something stupid and hurt themselves, often it is something that behind closed door HR can have a bit of a giggle about once we know that everybody's actually all right. But yes, there could potentially be a risk of a personal injury claim that you end up having to deal with your insurers to help resolve, and then potentially breach of contract claims. So if you have a sexual harassment policy and you roll out your Christmas party and then as a business you don't follow up on your sexual harassment policy and come down on negative behaviour, not only could you potentially be in breach of contract with your employee, but you could also be facing that sexual harassment claim. So again, not wanting to be the person who saps the fun out of the room, but there is a very real legal risk that comes with alcohol, parties and the festive period at work. We don't want to overstate it. We're not selling fear here. As I've said, there was only 40 claims last year out of 100,000 that actually hit the employment tribunal that related to Christmas parties, but we don't want to be the business that makes it 41 in 2026. So how do we address it? So immediate response. The first thing that I find within my client base is when something goes wrong at the Christmas party, there is the temptation to just deal with it in January. The reality is memories start to fade as soon as that party has finished. So if something has happened, something's been reported or something's been witnessed, we need to document that report immediately. We need to establish where, when, who witnessed it and what actually happened. If we have someone who is in that victim scenario, we need to be making sure that we are reassuring them that we're doing welfare checks and that we are establishing confidentiality all round from anybody who witnessed it or anybody who was involved. Because what we don't want is a situation where there's whispers going around the workplace and that story starts to evolve or develop away from what actually happened. So we're very calm, we're very organized, we need to be documenting, finding out who was there and making sure that we're taking witness statements and then requesting confidentiality until this process has concluded. Now, also remember the person who's being accused, it's innocent until they've been proven guilty. And we did see a really interesting case that was concluded this year where we had someone who was accused, I think it was of sexual harassment. His mental health deteriorated. He said it essentially ruined his life and got him to the point where mentally he was unable to work again. And he won an enormous payout from his employer for that mental injury. So we do need to make sure that where we have someone who is accused, that we're dealing with it fairly. We're not exhibiting any bias, but we are also checking in on their welfare during this investigation process. So we follow our investigation protocol, so make sure we're following our policies and procedures. So we start the investigation promptly, we document everything. If it means that you don't want to actually hold the formal meetings till the new year, that's fine. But let's try and get this investigation underway before we all finish for the Christmas break and not forgetting those welfare checks. If something meets the threshold for disciplinary action, now we cannot move that threshold simply because alcohol was involved or the word Christmas is in the sentence. If behaviour has fallen below a certain standard, those are not mitigating factors. So if it meets the threshold, we're not reducing conduct or the seriousness simply because it's Christmas or alcohol was involved or somebody says it was banter. We determine the appropriate action, we hold a fair process, and then there are consequences. This doesn't mean that we have knee-jerk reactions. So again, we're not overreacting because it's Christmas. We're not overreacting because, we've warned people to behave and then they haven't done. We still have to follow our typical processes and our policies and make sure that we deal with this in the same way as we would throughout the rest of the year. So we're not overreacting, we're not underreacting, we are following our process. We're not cutting corners just because it's Christmas. We're making sure that we're sending out those compliant letters. We're being very, very clear on what the alleged misconduct is. We're warning of appropriate outcomes. We're giving enough advance notice of that meeting, giving the right to be accompanied, holding those disciplinary meetings. So this isn't just a telling off. These are the allegations. What is your defense? What is your mitigation? Allowing somebody to have the chance to speak. We're not making the decision in the room. We're taking advice where we need to, and then we're delivering those outcomes in writing and giving the right to appeal. And then, of course, making sure that we are maintaining our documentation. So every single stage of this process, we're keeping minutes, we're making sure that we are sending and keeping copies of those letters, and that we're also documenting outcomes and we're keeping everything nice and secure. If this is something that you struggle with, don't forget our SaaS platform does have a full-blown disciplinary suite and all of those template letters in there, and the ability for you to hold all your investigatory materials as well in one organised place. So the dangers of getting it wrong. So average tribunal awards vary depending obviously on the type of case. So unfair dismissal, they're relatively low, between £5,000 and £7,000 is the average. For discrimination, depending on the type of discrimination, how many allegations, how serious it is, you can be looking at awards of over £100,000. This isn't scaremongering or in the most serious cases. We are seeing week on week cases being reported with enormous sums. So it's really, really important that we do take the risk seriously when it comes to things like sexual harassment, discrimination, which is what we're absolutely primed for at Christmas. These are where those bigger awards could be attached. And we are looking at up to 3 years now for tribunal claims to be resolved. Things are being listed into 2028 and even 2029. So even if you manage to get a hearing in 2028, it may not be that there's a remedy hearing or a full outcome until 2029. So this is something that could dominate your business for the next 3 years, simply because something's gone wrong at your Christmas party. So making sure that we are prioritizing this. This is something that actually represents business risk, not necessarily because of that compensation, but because of the distraction that this could be for your business. When we all know 2026 is going to be a difficult year, not only because of where we are politically, but because of all the changes that we're going to be coping with under the Employment Rights Bill and into 2027. We don't want the hassle of having to deal with either a tribunal claim or lengthy grievance processes because we've got something wrong. So try not to think of HR support or employment law advice as something that's just, oh, it's stopping compensation claims. There is a huge amount of value that can be added to your business from getting things right and being able to run your operations without the distraction of grievances, claims, or threats of claims. So let's do a quick quiz. Who thinks things need disciplinary action? So you can chuck a thumbs up into the chat if you agree something should be disciplined. And if you don't think something should be disciplined, if you can put a thumbs down into the chat. So scenario 1, an employee posts a photo of a colleague dancing on their personal Instagram story without permission. So at a Christmas party, there's a colleague dancing. They think it's a great moment, so they take a video and they put it on their personal Instagram. They haven't asked for permission, and the person in the video has complained. Is this something that warrants disciplinary action or not? So we have a thumbs down from Dawn. You can tell who's going to be posting on our social medias this afternoon. I mean, personally, I would say it's probably not something that necessarily requires disciplinary action. It might be a quiet reminder to people that, look, if we are going to be posting things on our personal social media that involves our work colleagues and something that they might find embarrassing, even if you don't think it is, just make sure that you've got their permission before you do so. And again, it might be something that we possibly cover off in policies. Number 2, a manager makes repeated comments about a colleague's appearance after several drinks at the party. Hopefully, we're all going to get this right. What do we think? So comments about someone's appearance, they've had lots of drinks, and it's a manager doing it about a colleague. Yep, I'd agree. Possibly drifting into sexual harassment territory here. Number 3, an employee arrives late for work the next day with a severe hangover impacting their productivity. Are we disciplining or not? Alyssa, the fun sponge, somebody might say I would discipline, but actually I wouldn't in this one. Dawn, discipline? Really? Joe, you surprised me, Joe. I did not think you'd be disciplining somebody for coming in with a hangover. So this one, I mean, look, if someone's turned up drunk, that's different. I think if someone comes in with a bad hangover and their productivity is not great the day after a Christmas party, I don't think it's something that I'd necessarily be disciplining for. Maybe a quiet word to suggest somebody gets a cup of coffee, perhaps doesn't overdo it next time. Number 4, 2 colleagues get into a heated argument about politics that becomes loud and disruptive during the event. So this one I think is an either way. I think it depends on what's being said and how disruptive it becomes. It's one of those where the investigation is going to be really, really key here to really understand what's gone on. And then finally, number 5, a staff member sends inappropriate, flirty text messages to a colleague during the party, making them uncomfortable. If I don't get loads of thumbs up on this one, I'm going to book you all onto sexual harassment training. Yeah, good. So the key is, as always, and this bit is just a bit of fun, is we don't want to have those knee-jerk reactions. So as we're in scenario 4, it might be something where we think, oh, actually, this may well drift into disciplinary territory. But until we've done that investigation, we just don't know. We can have a bit of a tolerance. So when it comes to somebody who perhaps comes in a little bit late, where they're not very productive, maybe we can have a bit of understanding with the fact that they've got a hangover from a party where we have provided alcohol. But if somebody is turning into work and they are still intoxicated, obviously that's very different. So case by case, investigate, no knee-jerk reactions. And also, don't be afraid, like me, of being called the fun sponge at work. Somebody has to take the role, unfortunately. So creating festive proof policies, lots of this sort of stuff can be not necessarily resolved, but we can make our lives easier if we have got clear policies around acceptable behaviour. So making sure that we communicate any policies and any expectations around behaviour nice and clearly in advance. So make sure that we've got reasonable boundaries in place so that we balance professional standards with allowing people to enjoy themselves. Making sure that we do have an inclusive approach. So consider all employees, including those who don't drink or perhaps have care responsibilities. What can we do to make sure that they can still engage with the festive period? And then if we think perhaps there are some people who need a bit of a top up around what is and what isn't acceptable, make sure that we're having a look at training and education, or perhaps retraining people around acceptable behaviour and sexual harassment. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you send out Christmas party invites with sexual harassment training attached to it. That maybe might be going a bit over the top, but it might be something that we think about either in advance of a party or perhaps in the run up to, so in the autumn of next year, having a think about whether we need to be reminding people about behaviour. And then once you've had your Christmas party, once you get into the new year, think, well, were our policies and documentation enough this year? Is there anything else that we need to cover? Society evolves. So in terms of things like TikTok trends and things that people do when they've had a drink, it changes year on year. So is there anything that we need to review when we're going through our policies to think, actually, this happened, it was okay, we got through by the skin of our teeth this year without somebody suing us or making a complaint, but do we need to update those policies so that they're nice and relevant to the people that are working for us and for the culture that we are operating in? I think we seem to be having a bit of a connection issue. Thankfully, I think we're getting towards the end. So keep it fun, keep it fair. So nobody wants to be the Grinch who ruins Christmas or the fun sponge like me. The goal isn't to entirely eliminate fun, but it's to create an environment where everybody feels safe and respected, and well-designed policies can help us to do that. So your post-party action plan, it actually starts before the party. So communicate expectations, brief your managers and ensure policies are acceptable. During the event itself, try and make sure there's a couple of people who are maybe not having as much to drink, or some sober managers who can intervene if something happens. Because remember, this is a workplace event. If something happens and you've got somebody who either needs to be supported or there's a welfare issue, you do need to make sure that there's somebody responsible who can help deal with that. Immediately afterwards, if something happens, gather witness statements, secure evidence whilst it's still fresh, conduct proper investigations and take appropriate documented action, and then do a bit of a debrief in the new year and think, do we need to update our policies? Is there anything that we need to think on for next year, including training? So what we've covered, we've gone through some examples of inappropriate behaviour. We've discussed briefly the potential legal claims. We've addressed a couple of incidents, and then we've considered why we might need to review our policies. So actions following this session, make sure you are reviewing your policies. Have a quick look if you haven't already done so, if you haven't already circulated them. Make sure you've briefed your managers and your supervisors and you've communicated expectations to your staff. You've established clear procedures. Make sure people do actually know how to complain if something goes wrong and that there is somebody available to talk to. Consider pre-event or post-event training and make sure that you document everything. If there's anything in here that has got you particularly worried, or you think we can do the run up to this a bit better next year, or perhaps you want to look at a plan throughout the year for how we can communicate better with staff, how we can educate staff better in terms of behaviour and good and bad standards of behaviour and what we expect of them, then don't hesitate to drop us a line about our e-learning training, our consultancy service, and also our software platform, so we can help you with a full wraparound service as and when it's needed. So Dawn has dropped in the link if you would like to book a consultation with me. We'd really, really love it if you could leave us a Trustpilot review. They really do mean a lot to us, and they really, really help us as well with our social media and marketing as well. And thank you very much. I think this is our last session before Christmas. Is that right, Dawn? Yeah. So thank you so much for those of you who have been regular attendees through the course of this year. We really do enjoy delivering these, and we will be putting out more events into next year as well. I hope you all have a lovely festive period. And for anyone who is a current or previous customer, thank you so much for your support through 2025. That's everything from me. We're going to be signing off and heading off to our very sensible Christmas party here at Heroes. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you all very soon.